This is the cross triceps extension, and you're going to take the left hand and use the pulley on the opposite side. So you'll actually have to reach over maybe with the right hand, grab hold, there you go. Now, I'm going to highly recommend that you use the next to the narrowest pulley setting. Maybe that's number 2 if you're counting from inside here. And the position that you put your upper arm in is going to determine whether this cable is going to bother you or not. And what I mean by that is if you're too low, you're going to see that as Josh straightens out his arm, it rubs on his shoulder. If you're too high when he straightens out his arm, it gets close to his head. So we really want you to do this in the most comfortable place. And if you get your arm just right, notice it doesn't touch against anything at all. It'll rub right in towards his neck, but never get really close to it. So kind of mess with that and be real careful. And one of the keys to maintaining that is maintaining the upper arm position. Once you choose it, don't let this upper arm go outward as you straighten. Don't let it move up and down. Don't let it move towards your head. Try your best to keep it there, and that is almost always going to be the key to most of these triceps exercises, is holding this upper arm relatively still. Now, grip-wise on this, he can choose kind of this hammer grip where his little finger is kind of leading the way, and it's a really nice grip. We're using the standard grip, or he started out with a supinated grip or kind of palm towards the pulley kind of a grip, and that'll work fine too. Whichever one you prefer, you can even alternate them. But the big thing here, watch the upper arm, get everything lined up, and keep that cable moving in a nice, smooth, safe place. This is the seated biceps curl, and there's a lot more than biceps working here because everything that helps to bend your elbow is working. There's some forearm musculature, there's some muscles beneath the biceps, brachialis for example, if you're concerned about those names. But you're seated, and the seat height will affect things a little bit. In other words, if it's too low, you may not be able to straighten your arms out all the way due to the length of the handles and that kind of thing. So mess with that a little bit. If it's too high, then you're going to be way up in the air and having to reach down further than you need to grab the handles. Grabbing the handles is the next thing we're going to look at. Take care when you bend over and grab that handle. For example, when Josh does that, he's nice and slow and paying attention to what his back's doing. Not that you can keep it perfectly straight to do that, but that you're not just jerking and yanking on things. So keep control over your body. Then, once you grab the handle and you're ready to go, you're basically keeping your palms forward for this first version anyway, and then making sure your upper arm stays where it starts. And that's going to be very important because the common thing to do, let your upper arm go back as you start to curl. You see people do that. They kind of let their arm go back, and as they get to the top, they kind of bring it forward. Yeah, and see, when you do that, you're really losing a lot of the tension on the muscle groups, the elbow flexors that you're trying to work. And that kind of defeats the purpose. So pay close attention to keeping this upper arm in one place, and especially at the top of the motion there. Don't bring it forward. At least not right now anyway. There you go. Josh is doing a great job. Now with this exercise, there's so many things you could do. You could alternate them the way Josh is. You could actually alternate at the same time so that one's going up while the other's coming down. A little coordinated effort there. You could do them both simultaneously, both up and both down at the same time. So there's a lot of neat options. And now we can actually make virtually a completely new exercise by changing the grip. So if Josh goes to the hammer grip where you slide that handle on the webbing, and now the thumb's going straight up against the resistance, the thumb's straight up in the air. And it's all the same muscles. What you're asking for is a little bit of a different contribution from each of those muscles. And it's said that with this exercise that this muscle here, the brachioradialis, and even the other guy, the one below the bicep, the brachialis, they may be working a little harder than before. So there's slight differences. And you may also notice that you might have to change the resistance when you make some of these variations occur. So don't be surprised if that happens. And one thing that must be said relative to every exercise on the bowflex, don't ever try to take what you've done in the gym before. If you've ever worked out there before, and let's say you use 30-pound dumbbells on this exercise, do not assume that you can use 30 pounds on the bowflex. This is so important on every exercise. Start from scratch and figure out the resistance appropriate to these exercises on this machine. Although virtually every arm curl ends up being called a biceps curl, there are so many things working inside here. So we're just going to call them arm curls. And the first version we're going to show you in the standing position. Oh, by the way, to get in the standing position, you had to not only adjust the pulleys to the width you chose or you wanted, which is probably not the widest, somewhere in between there. but you also have to bend down and pick up the handles. And remember, every time you bend down to get in position, to grab the weight, make sure you're taking care of how you pick this thing up. Now, next, I'll show you the first one. She's just going to keep her palm facing the front the whole time, facing forward. And the thing she's going to really watch here is that her upper arm doesn't move. Now, she's chosen a position that I think is great, where her arm is not exactly straight up and down with the world. It's slightly angled forward. She could do it with her arm straight up and down and keep it there. Or this is great too, where it's actually very slightly angled forward. But the thing that's awesome is how she's keeping it there the whole time. So you need to watch that. Make sure that you can hold your upper arm wherever you start is where it stays. And she's also not bending her whole body around, trying to really tug on the weight with every other muscle in her whole body from head to toe. So watch that as well. Make sure you choose your weight appropriately and understand the concept of control. Now we can make a nice little change here by going to a hammer position, where you simply slide the handle on the webbing, and now she's leading the way with the top part or thumb part of her hand, and we've changed the contribution of the elbow flexors, although they're all still working. Same goal of keeping her upper arm stable. And a final version where it's called a reverse curl, and she's more in a pronated grip. You may have heard that term before, but the palm is facing the ground, and that's the main thing there. And she's trying her best to keep her wrist pretty straight, and she's keeping her upper arm stable once again. So all of those are wonderful variations. You may actually find that you have to change the weight or the power rods between those different exercises, because if we were really using a super challenging load for her on the first one, we might not be that strong on some of these other variations. So pay close attention to that. This next curl is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of a combination of what you'd see in the gym as a concentration curl, and even a Scott curl or preacher curl, which is performed more with your arm on a bench. So Josh, let's show him. It's one arm at a time, and you're going to grab right hand, right handle, and you're going to kind of twist so that you can actually put your upper arm on the bench. Now the key is, a lot of people say, oh, my arm's resting on the bench, I don't have to worry about it anymore, the bench is taking care of supporting it. That's not entirely true. It's more of a reference point than it is true support, meaning if you're doing it wrong, show them what you see in the gym sometimes, Josh, where people are kind of rocking around with their arm moving all over the bench. You're still going to have to support this thing yourself. In fact, you might want to consider smashing your tricep more against it and your shoulder back, and even bringing your elbow away from it a little bit. But the big thing is that he's holding all this still, just like most of your other curls. And he can also choose a variety of grips, fully supinated like he is right there. He could go to hammer. He could do all those kinds of things. Let me show you one other variation that you can explore. I don't know which one's going to work best for you. Where he actually steps behind this pad and puts his leg behind this corner right here. Some people might like this a little better, and without a doubt there's not going to be any difference in terms of performance and what you're going to get out of it. The most important thing is that you're comfortable with it. So again, holding this relatively still and not rocking around on the pad is going to be your key for this little hybrid movement. Probably the most traditional and most common biceps, or more importantly elbow flexor exercise, is with a bar. But there are actually some considerations when using a straight bar that you don't have to worry about when you're using the individual handles. But let's take a look at those. Josh, go ahead and stand in here. We're going to use the pulleys from the platform here, and we've put the same bar on that you would use for squats or something like that. And the first thing we need to look at, so many times you'll hear the instructions from magazines or TV shows or something to grab the bar at shoulder width, and that is a huge mistake, monstrous, because at shoulder width you can't turn your palms all the way to the front. And let's take a look at Josh. When he turns his palms all the way to the front, we have this angle in the arms that is in everybody to varying degrees, called the carrying angle. So when he grabs this bar at shoulder width, he's actually putting a twist in his arms that's going to be real uncomfortable and create almost a shin splint. Have you ever had that before in the beginning? Almost a shin splint type of sensation, a deep bone kind of ache, because the bar is trying to twist you to a place you're not supposed to be. So you simply look at what the body says about it. It says, hey, I need to be a little bit wider here. So shoulder width is not going to be what we're looking for. A couple inches wider than shoulder width is it. So when he grabs the bar with that in mind, watching his back when he lifts it and all that good stuff, There. And it's not about turning your hands outward. It's just simply about turning them to the front and see what's available in you. Stand in the mirror, take a look. And that's going to be your grip width here. And now it's going to be so much more comfortable for him. And when he performs his curl, he's got the similar considerations to any other curl, for that matter, any other tricep exercise, where the main thing is what he does with his upper arm. And he does a great job of keeping it steady. Show him what happens with some people when they're making some mistakes here and their arm moves. See, that was so perfect for how to do it wrong. And it's pretty common, though, where the arm goes back and then go forward. One more time on that for the side camera, Josh, where the cheating thing. See that whole thing? Now, that didn't hurt anything. It wasn't dangerous, but it probably didn't create the emphasis that you want in these arm muscles. So the next thing is that I want to show you on the bowflex that's really cool. You see, normally when you're doing this exercise and you got a free weight, a barbell in your hand or a dumbbell, when you get to the bottom, you're not doing anything. It's balanced. It's just hanging there. Well, the cool thing about this, if you could see the angle of the cable, it's actually, when he's at the bottom, it's actually pulling backwards a little bit. And you can even adjust that further by moving that pulley back one notch towards his leg. Well, that slightly backward angle, or he could even try this, take one notch forward, just a step. Right there. Now see that angle, how that's pulling backwards on him? You're only going to get this on the bowflex because that backward angle is creating some tension from the very beginning. So he's going to be working harder right here from the start, and of course continuing that all the way through with his perfect form. So you can potentially get a better workout on the bowflex for this exercise than any gym you could walk into. For the reverse grip version of a barbell curl, your hand grip is really easy. You see, when we're doing the normal barbell curl where your palms facing forward, we have this thing called a carrying angle that requires you to have a wider than shoulder width grip. Here, where your palms facing down, you can honestly do a shoulder width grip without concern. It will not affect a thing. It will not bother you a bit. So Josh has got about shoulder width there, and we're simply going to try our best to keep the upper arm from not moving. We've got a little bit lighter weight on this from maybe the traditional barbell curl where your palms are forward, because we've put the arm in a position where it's not quite as strong by twisting the forearm over like that. So one more time, big thing, holding still, not swaying back and forth in the body, and this is a great variation. And sometimes I wish people would almost start with this. We spend so much time doing the more traditional movements. These variations are just as important many times. This is another version of an arm extension or triceps exercise, but it's traditionally called the kickback. And so we're simulating something you may have seen on videotapes or in books or magazines or in the gym, and we're doing a great job over on the bowflex. Amy's going to come right around here. We're going to do one arm at a time, and there's your handle. And I'm going to start with the hammer version of this. So you're going to take the standard grip and slip it through so that it's all lined up with the cable. And then she's going to bend forward, keeping a pretty nice position here, and then bring this upper arm back just about parallel to the ground. Now again, the key is try to hold this here as we straighten out. Now, once you get the idea of holding your upper arm steady, there's something you might notice. Because of how far away from the machine she is, if you're this far away, you might notice that the rods are bending a lot. And remember, the further they bend, the harder it is. So if this is too hard at the end, but it seems like it's just, you know, through this part of the range seems like it's really easy, here's what you might try. You could either take the hand off of, you know, she was supporting herself on the bench right here. You could put it up here on this bar, crossbar, or even, she could even take her forearm and rest it across the top of the pad. But the whole goal of those changes is simply to get her closer to the machine so we're not going through as much bend in the rod. And doesn't that feel easier? Mm-hmm. So obviously, if you wanted the opposite, if you wanted it harder, you could scoot back a little bit with all the, you know, the way she started. But there are also alternate hand positions here that some people feel are, you know, valuable as completely different exercises. They're not going to change what's happening in your tricep, but they are nice alterations. Go ahead and bend forward here again, Amy. And let's see that she's got her palm facing backwards this time. And she goes to full extension. She does not stop short. She fully squeezes and contracts this tricep the whole time. And another variation would be to turn the palm towards the machine entirely. So she'd be leading the way with her knuckles. And some people may find that a little tough to hold on to. And as we've mentioned with a lot of these variations, you might have to change the actual resistance you use as you change the forearm or grip position. But the key again remains to try to hold this still and go to full extension. I love this next exercise because it's so uncommon. We're going to actually do an arm curl on one side and an arm extension on the other side. We're going to call this arm opposition because the directions of resistance are coming from completely opposite directions. And you should really try this. It's very uncommon to find this in a gym or someone performing it in a gym, but we think it's a major thing you could do on a bowflex. So jump right in here, Josh, and go ahead and grab that bottom one first. So he's got the curl portion of it, and then he's just going to reach up easily to get the arm extension resistance. Now his whole goal here is to do them at the same time. So there he goes. Everything he learned from every other tricep exercise he's ever addressed and bicep exercise he's applying here, meaning the upper arm is not moving on either side. He's extending one arm as he's curling the other arm. Notice he is leaning back against the back pad here. He's got his rear against the back pad, but he doesn't necessarily have his torso against the back pad. So that's actually a key point that you might want to look at. Now he can also do some other things that are kind of strange. For example, go ahead and leave this here and take that one down. Straighten your arm down. There you go. Now move them both at the same time. So you're going up at the same time and down at the same time. There are a lot of little coordinated effort types of things you can do inside of your head that differentiate the challenges. So it's more about the motor pattern and what's going on inside your brain and your neurological system, not just what's going on in your muscles. And that's some of the benefit to these kinds of exercises. This exercise could be called upper body opposition because it's not just going to be like a curl and an arm extension at the same time. It's going to be a pull down and a shoulder press at the same time. Now there are a couple of situations here you're going to have to take a look at before you choose which parts of the machine you're going to use. You're going to always use the lat tower on one side, all right? But notice something. When Josh reaches up and grabs this, he's got a little slack here. Now we're not going to worry about this right now, but when you're at home, you may have to adjust the seat lower. Now as you adjust the seat lower, that may create a situation over here to where you're almost, imagine if the seat was low, you'd be starting up real high on this side in order to keep the slack out of it. So you may find that if you have to put the seat all the way at the bottom in order to do your pull down, you may end up using your shoulder press from the platform pulley using the adjustable webbing to extend the handle up to where you can grab it. So just keep that in mind as you set up the machine. We're going to go ahead and use it this way because a lot of people will be able to use it this way using the crossbar pulley for the shoulder press and the lat tower for the pull down. So now everything is going to be similar to previous exercises where these were done either all shoulder press or all pull down, meaning he's reaching up and extending his arm, and as he comes down this other side, he's bringing that shoulder blade down while he brings his arm down to his side. Remember all those things, or look back and review the individual exercises of pull down and shoulder press to get that information. Now, the one thing we're going to make sure that we're going to do with this is change sides in order to get the opposite directions of resistance for these other sides. So eventually he will need to do a left arm pull down and a right arm overhead press. And the big thing we can do here as we increase the ranges of motion by lowering the seat and that kind of thing, he'll be able to even have slight movements in his trunk as he pulls and pushes. And that little bit of trunk movement is not a bad thing either, because that's actually part of the normal movement of the spine in association with very specific movements of the upper extremity. Let's take a look at a couple of wrist exercises, and we're going to take a look at wrist flexion and wrist extension. And one of the easiest ways to do this, you're going to be standing on the platform, and honestly you could face either direction. We've just chosen to have Amy actually put her hips against the pad right here while staying away from the pad on the top part. So this is